Alien Girl saw the human stand against the shattering wind. His quiet motive changed her view. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The wind began before sunrise, a low tremor that made the steel braces of the outpost hum like a warning. Ethan Cole felt it through the floor plates as he tightened the last bolt on a damaged sensor array, the metal still warm from overloaded circuits. Outside the small viewing slit, the sky flickered with fractured blue arcs, signs the shattering wind was building faster than forecast. His breath fogged inside his helmet as he stepped through the pressure door. Cold air hit him first, sharp as broken glass. Dust lifted off the ground in thin spirals, drifting sideways under the pull of unstable currents. Readings blinked across his visor, velocity spikes, atmospheric cracks, rising ion pressure. He should have stayed inside. Everyone would have. But the array fed half the region's early warning network, and without it, smaller settlements had no chance of tracking the storm. He walked anyway, boots crunching over crystallized soil, shoulders braced against gusts that pushed like invisible hands. Each step felt heavier, but the rhythm steadied him. In, out. Keep moving. He reached the tower base when a new sound sliced through the wind, a sharp metallic cry, almost like armor scraping rock. Ethan turned. Through the swirling grit, a figure stumbled along the ridge. Tall, bronze-red skin catching the scattered light, armor plates dull from impact. An alien scouting harness, cracked at the joints. She tried to stand against the gusts, but the wind shoved her sideways, sliding her toward a narrow drop. Ethan didn't think. His body moved first. He crossed the ground in a few long strides, leaning forward to keep balance as the wind pressed harder. The air shook with pressure, rattling his helmet seals. When he reached her, she lifted her head, eyes bright with surprise and confusion. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Another gust hit, stronger than the last, sending debris skittering across the rock. Ethan planted his boots and stepped in front of her, raising his arm to shield her from the blow. The impact thudded through him, forcing his knees to bend, but he held his stance, muscles burning. His visor dimmed automatically as the light flared white. The gust eased. She stared at him, not in gratitude, not yet, but in disbelief, as if trying to understand why a human, small compared to her people, would stand in front of an alien he had never met. Ethan didn't offer an explanation. He simply adjusted his footing, checked the ridge for safer ground, and motioned for her to follow. The wind roared again, but quieter this time, almost like it was watching. And for the first moment since dawn, she looked at him differently, as though the storm wasn't the only force capable of reshaping her world. The wind eased just enough for Ethan to guide the alien girl toward the shallow overhang carved into the ridge. Dust drifted in soft sheets, settling on their boots as they stepped inside the narrow shelter. The air felt warmer here, muted from the sharp edges of the storm. Ethan checked the readings on his wrist panel, the green light flickering as the sensor reconnected with the outpost grid. He exhaled slowly. The network was still online. Good. The girl watched him with steady amber eyes, her expression unreadable beneath the faint shimmer of her bronze-red skin. She stood taller than him, even with the slight hunch from exhaustion, the cracked plates of her armor humming softly as they cooled. Her voice finally broke the silence, low and resonant. You walked into the shattering wind without hesitation. Humans do not do that. Ethan tried a small shrug, feeling the ache in his shoulders from bracing against the gusts. The array needed a hands-on reset. I was closer than anyone else. She tilted her head, not satisfied. That is the reason you tell yourself. But it was not the only reason. He looked away, pretending to study the rock patterns at their feet. The truth was simple. He acted because someone was in trouble. He never thought much beyond that. The wind outside pulsed like a slow heartbeat, echoing faintly against the stone. The girl shifted her weight, testing her footing. The joint of her left greave sparked with a faint metallic flick, and Ethan stepped closer. Hold still, he said gently. He crouched and brushed dirt away from the cracked hinge. The fracture was clean, not dangerous, but enough to make movement difficult. He tightened two exposed fasteners with the small multi-tool clipped to his belt. She watched his hands, her breath steady, her posture gradually relaxing as she realized he meant no harm. "You know our equipment," she murmured, softer now. "A little," he admitted. "Not enough to rebuild it. Enough to keep it from falling apart for a while." When he stood, she regarded him differently, as though recalibrating her understanding of him. "I am Sira Velan," she said at last. "Scout of the Aerith boundary line." Ethan nodded once. "Ethan Cole, maintenance lead at Outpost 12. A gust swept past the entrance, stirring her hair. She glanced toward the storm, then back at him. "Your people think the shattering wind cannot be endured," she said. "Most of ours believe the same." Her eyes lingered on him with a quiet focus. "But you stood in it." Her voice carried neither praise nor disbelief, only a kind of thoughtful gravity. Ethan rubbed his chilled fingers together. "Sometimes the only way out is through," he replied. Sira considered this, the corners of her eyes softening just slightly. Outside, the arcs of blue light along the horizon began to thin, signaling that the worst of the storm had passed. She stepped closer to the edge of the shelter, testing the air with her hand. "It will settle soon," she said. "When it does, we should move. Your outpost is safer than the open ridge." Ethan nodded. "We will go when the readings drop." For a moment they stood side by side, listening to the fading pulse of the wind. And in that quiet space between the gusts, Sira looked at him with a new certainty, as if the storm had revealed something she did not expect to find in a human, something solid and steady that did not bend even when the world around them did. The storm dwindled to a low rumble, the kind that vibrated through the ground like a distant engine settling into idle. Ethan checked the numbers scrolling across his wrist panel. Pressure dropping. Visibility rising. Sira stepped toward the mouth of the shelter, her posture more stable now that her damaged armor hinge had stopped sparking. The softened glow along her silhouette caught the light in a way that made her look almost sculpted from warm metal rather than flesh. "We can move," she said quietly. "The currents have shifted." Ethan nodded and adjusted the seals on his helmet. When they stepped out, the ridge felt different from before, as if the storm had scraped away its sharpness. The air carried only a gentle hum, a leftover echo of the shattering wind's force. Dust swirled in slow spirals instead of cutting streaks. Sira walked beside him with careful steps, testing her repaired joint. Her movements were precise, the kind that came from years of training rather than instinct. She scanned the horizon with a calm, practiced sweep, then glanced at him. "Your outpost," she said, "is how far?" "About 1 mile northwest," Ethan replied. "Down that incline, across a flat stretch, then over a small rise. We should make it before the next pulse cycle." She looked at him again, studying his tone. "You speak as if you know this storm like an old companion." He let out a small breath that fogged inside his visor. "After 5 seasons on this planet, you start to notice patterns." Sira considered this with a thoughtful tilt of her head. "Our scouts do the same. But this storm was not supposed to form for another 3 days." Ethan hesitated. "Yes, that is what bothers me." They walked in silence for a moment, boots sinking into patches of loose mineral sand. The horizon brightened with soft gold where the sun pushed through thinning clouds. Little reflections glinted from the ground, tiny shards of glass formed by the storm's heat. Sira bent slightly, brushing her fingers over one of the shards. It chimed faintly under her touch. "Your world shapes itself through sound and pressure," she said. "It is unpredictable." "Some say the same about humans," Ethan replied. Sira's lips curved with the smallest hint of amusement. "Perhaps." They continued forward. A sensor tower peeked over the next ridge, its beacon light blinking a steady blue. Ethan tapped his wrist panel, watching the network reconnect with clearer signal strength. Relief loosened his chest. Sira watched the blinking light, her expression shifting. "Your people rely on these towers to predict the wind?" "Yes," he said. "They keep the settlements safe." Her eyes softened. "Then your work matters more than you realize." Ethan looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. She held his gaze for a moment before facing forward again. The wind brushed past them gently, almost warm now, and the path ahead opened in smooth curves toward the outpost. For the first time since Ethan stepped into the storm that morning, the world felt steady. Yet there was something else in the air too, something quieter than wind, something unspoken between them. Sierra walked closer, her steps matching his pace, as though she had decided without announcement that their paths were now aligned, at least for this stretch of land. And Ethan, without thinking much about it, adjusted his stride so she would not have to slow down. They reached the lower ridge as the last ribbons of dust settled, leaving the air strangely calm after the storm's intensity. The outpost stood ahead, a compact structure of reinforced panels and antenna masts, its metal surface catching the afternoon light in muted reflections. Ethan keyed the outer gate, and the lock responded with a soft chime. Sierra paused before entering, her gaze sweeping over the structure. "Your shelter is small," she observed, not critically, simply noting. "Small, yes," Ethan replied, "but it holds steady." Inside, the air felt warmer, filtered through humming vents. The lights flickered once as the generators adjusted to the opening door. Ethan removed his helmet and placed it on the console. A faint ache settled in his shoulders, the kind that came after pushing against something far heavier than oneself. Sierra stepped in behind him, her eyes tracing the equipment on the walls, the monitors, the weather modules, the readings still stabilizing from the storm's interference. She reached toward one of the displays, but stopped before touching it. "You live alone here?" Ethan nodded. "Most seasons, yes." She absorbed that quietly. "Your species often chooses solitude for duty." He considered that. Sometimes it is not a choice, just the nature of the job. He motioned toward a seat. "You should rest for a moment. The joint I repaired needs time before it carries your full weight again." She sat with controlled precision, the metal of her armor settling in layered clicks. Her gaze followed him as he moved across the room, checking systems, resetting alerts, recalibrating sensors that had been shaken off alignment. "The storm cycle was early," Sierra said, her voice steady. 3 days early, according to our charts." Ethan paused mid-adjustment. "You said your scouts predicted the same window?" She nodded. "Our algorithms are precise. A deviation like this is not natural." He felt a small chill that had nothing to do with the air temperature. "So something triggered it," he murmured. Sierra studied him for a long moment, her expression softening into something thoughtful. "When the wind struck at full force, you shielded me without hesitation. You could have turned back to your outpost." Ethan set down the tool he was holding. "I did not think about options. I just moved." "Humans act on instinct," she said quietly, "but not all instincts are compassionate ones." She leaned back slightly, the warm bronze hue of her skin reflecting the overhead lights. "In my world, many would have chosen differently." Ethan met her eyes. "In mine too." Something shifted between them then, subtle as the change in pressure before a breeze. Not spoken aloud, but felt. She broke the silence first, her gaze drifting to the nearest display. "Your readings. They show a deeper disturbance in the atmosphere. This is not simply a storm." Ethan joined her at the console. The data lines trembled with irregular pulses, like a heartbeat trying to sync with the wrong rhythm. He frowned. This might be a larger cycle forming. Sierra stood slowly, careful on her repaired leg, her height nearly catching the overhead light. "If a greater wind front arrives, you cannot remain in this outpost alone." Ethan glanced at her. "Are you planning to stay?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Until the sky settles, yes." The hum of the outpost deepened, and outside, the horizon darkened again, as if gathering its breath. And for the first time since the storm began, Ethan did not feel entirely alone in the waiting. The horizon dimmed to a muted copper tone as the atmosphere shifted again, the light outside the outpost stretching into long, wavering bands. Ethan watched the readings spike gently, not enough to signal danger, but enough to suggest that the sky was still unsettled. Sierra stood near the observation port, her bronze-red skin reflecting the ambient glow, giving her an almost luminous outline in the fading daylight. Her repaired joint moved more smoothly now, though she remained careful with each step. "Your world changes moods quickly," she said, her voice low, almost contemplative. Ethan nodded, adjusting a calibration dial on the nearest console. "Some days it feels like it has a mind of its own." She glanced at him, her expression softening with an understanding that did not require words. The outpost hummed gently, the lights warm and steady, the air filters cycling with a quiet rhythm. For a moment, The building felt less like a remote research station and more like a small island of calm in an unpredictable landscape. Ethan turned toward the central module where a set of diagnostic logs blinked with new entries. If the next cycle forms early, we need accurate wind tracking, he said. Otherwise the settlements will not have enough warning. Syrah stepped closer, her height giving her a clear view of the display. Your instruments measure the surface pressure, she observed, but the Aerith method is different. We read the sound before the pressure. Ethan looked at her, intrigued. Sound. She tapped lightly on the frame of the console, producing a soft, resonant note. The wind sings before it arrives. The tones shift with density, temperature, and velocity. My people have trained for generations to hear the subtle variations. Ethan absorbed this with quiet concentration. Can you teach me what to listen for? Syrah studied him for a long moment, as if evaluating not his capability, but his intention. Then she nodded. Yes. Sit. Ethan pulled up a seat beside her. She placed her hand on the console, eyes half closed, listening to the faint vibrations passing through the metal. Focus on the low tones, she instructed. Do not force your mind to label them. Let them rise and fall like breath. Ethan leaned slightly closer, resting his fingertips on the frame. The outpost's usual hum blended with a softer underlying pulse, almost too faint to notice. There, Syrah whispered. Do you hear it? He listened harder, allowing the sound to settle rather than chase it. Eventually a subtle rhythm emerged, distant and slow, like the echo of a wave against sand. That, she said, is the early signature of a mild front. Harmless. Ethan glanced at the readings. My instruments do not pick that up for another hour. Syrah allowed herself a small pleased smile. Our methods complement each other. The air inside the outpost shifted again, carrying a comfortable warmth from the vents. Syrah stepped back from the console, her gaze turning thoughtful. When I first saw you in the storm, I assumed you acted without awareness of its danger. Ethan let out a small breath. I knew enough to be worried, not enough to walk away. She held his gaze a little longer this time, as if seeing more than his words revealed. Then perhaps, she said gently, you understand the wind better than you think. Outside, the sky brightened slightly, and the last tremors of the earlier storm faded into quiet. Inside, the space between them felt more connected, shaped not by the wind, but by shared understanding, patient observation, and the steady calm that had begun to form between two very different worlds. Evening settled gently across the outpost, soft enough that the metal walls seemed to breathe with the cooling air. Ethan dimmed the overhead lights, letting the warm glow from the monitoring panels guide his movements. Syrah remained by the observation port, her posture composed but thoughtful, as if listening to something beyond the visible sky. The earlier calm had shifted into a delicate quiet, the kind that made every small sound clearer. Ethan approached with 2 steaming cups of hydration mix, offering one to her. She accepted it with both hands, lifting it cautiously. It smells warm, she said, almost curious. It is not as strong as your field rations, Ethan replied, but it helps settle the cold after a storm. She tasted it, her expression surprised by its mild sweetness. Your people value comfort, she murmured, not in judgment, but in reflection. In my world, warmth is something earned, not shared. Ethan leaned against the nearby console. Some things feel easier when not earned alone. Her eyes flicked toward him, holding for a moment before drifting back to the sky. You speak in ways that unsettle the boundaries I was taught, she admitted. Ethan offered a small nod. Boundaries do not always survive a storm. Syrah drew a slow breath, as if weighing the truth of that, then shifted to face him more fully. Ethan Cole, she said with quiet clarity. You helped me without knowing who I was. But I knew who you were before I approached the ridge. Ethan straightened slightly, surprised. You did. Syrah lowered her cup, fingers resting lightly against its warm surface. Your name appeared in our border reports. A human who maintained wind towers in unstable terrain. A human who stepped toward danger. More than once. My scouts were instructed to observe from a distance. He blinked, absorbing that. I did not realize I was on anyone's radar. Your people may not see you clearly, she said, but the wind does. You move toward risk the way others move toward shelter. Ethan let out a soft breath, unsure how to respond. Her words were not flattery. They carried the weight of honest observation. She continued gently. When I saw you on the ridge, I expected a worker scrambling for safety. Instead, I saw you turn toward the collapse, not away from it. Her gaze steadied on him. That is why I approached. I wanted to understand the human who did not behave like most humans. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. I was not trying to prove anything. Exactly, she replied. That is what makes it rare. The outpost's sensors chimed softly, signaling a new wind signature. Syrah set her cup aside and stepped closer to the main display. The tone has changed, she said, tilting her head to listen. Ethan joined her, letting the faint vibration settle through his fingertips. The rhythm was different, slower, heavier, like a deeper current moving beneath the atmosphere. Is it dangerous? He asked. Syrah shook her head gently. Not dangerous, but significant. It means the sky is shifting its weight. The next cycle may not arrive as expected. He looked at her. Then we prepare? Yes, she said, but not in fear. In awareness. The subtle harmony of her words settled in the room like a warm pulse. Outside, the sky darkened into smooth layers of shadow, but inside, an unexpected calm grew between them, steady and unforced, shaped by shared quiet rather than shared danger. And as the sensors hummed their low song of approaching change, Ethan found himself listening not just to the wind, but to the steady presence of the alien scout standing beside him. The low vibration within the outpost deepened as night settled, a gentle reminder that the sky above them was not resting, but shifting in slow, deliberate layers. Ethan watched the readings pulse in steady intervals, the pattern uncommon enough to keep him alert. Syrah stood beside the central console, listening in her quiet way, her head tilted slightly, as if catching an echo too soft for human ears. The tone is heavier now, she murmured. It means something beneath. The atmosphere is preparing to rise. Ethan checked the thermal map. Rising how? Temperature? Pressure? Neither, she replied softly. It is intention. The wind has intention when it gathers from deep currents. Ethan had heard many scientists talk about weather, but never in a way that made the sky feel almost alive. He moved to the storage cabinet and pulled out a set of reinforced bracers. The material clinked lightly in his hands. Syrah watched him fasten one around his forearm. You think you will need protection, she said. Ethan secured the clasp. I would rather prepare now than regret it later. Syrah stepped closer, her armor catching the muted light in gentle reflections. If something rises, she said carefully, I will stand with you. Ethan paused mid-adjustment, taken aback by the certainty in her voice. Syrah, you do not owe me that. It is not debt, she answered. It is recognition. You stepped into the wind for me. I step into whatever comes next for you. Her tone carried no dramatic flair, only a quiet truth. Ethan felt the air shift in a way that had nothing to do with the outpost's ventilation system. Before either of them could speak again, a soft tremor ran through the floor plates. Not a quake, not instability, something more like a distant, steady heartbeat. Syrah's eyes widened slightly. It is closer than I expected. Ethan scanned the sensors. I am not seeing anything. You will, she said. The sound warns before the instruments do. She moved to the observation port, placing one hand against the glass. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the dim light. On my world, she explained, wind currents are studied to understand the behavior of deeper elements. They rise when drawn to heat or pressure, but they rise faster when drawn to imbalance. Ethan joined her. Imbalance of what? Syrah turned her gaze toward him, her expression steady and almost gentle. Courage, she said. Fear. Determination. The wind answers the strongest emotion on the ridge. Ethan blinked. You are telling me the storm reacted to us? She nodded once. Not to our bodies. To our choices. He exhaled slowly. That is not something my training prepared me for. Nor mine, she admitted. But the pattern is clear. Outside, a faint shimmer swept across the ground, stirring tiny crystals into a soft ripple. It looked harmless, almost beautiful, but Syrah watched it with focused attention. When the wind chooses a path, she said quietly, it tests the ones who walk it. Ethan felt the weight of her words settle inside him, not as warning, but as understanding. He looked out at the shimmering air, then back at her. Then we faced the test together. Syrah's breath eased, her posture relaxing with a subtle grace. Yes, she said. Together. The tremor returned, softer this time, like the world drawing in a slow breath before revealing what came next. And in the quiet space between those pulses, Ethan sensed that the next moment would ask more of them than the storm ever did. The tremor beneath the outpost floor settled into a steady pulse, soft enough to feel, but clear enough that neither Ethan nor Sierra could dismiss it as ordinary. The monitors flickered with faint distortions, thin waves moving across the screens like the echo of something trying to push through. Ethan tapped one of the displays, but the readings refused to stabilize. "The sensors are not failing," Sierra said quietly. "They are hesitating. They do that when the air is preparing to shift into a new pattern." Ethan glanced at her. "A stronger cycle?" She shook her head. "A deeper truth." Before he could ask what she meant, a subtle glow began to pulse along the edges of the observation port. Not bright, not threatening, almost like a reflection of moonlight that had found its way inside. Sierra stepped closer, her expression changing, not with fear, but with recognition. "It is a call," she whispered. "From what?" Ethan asked. She turned toward him, the light framing her outline in warm gold. "From my people. Or rather, from those who watch the sky as I do." Ethan's breath tightened. "They are nearby?" Sierra nodded slowly. "They have been searching for me since the storm separated our scouting line. But this," she gestured toward the shimmering light, "this is not merely a search signal. It is a summons. It means I am expected to return." Ethan felt a subtle heaviness settle inside him. Not dramatic, just the quiet awareness that something was shifting. "Return," he repeated, trying to keep his voice steady. "Because they need you?" Sierra looked out the window again, the glow reflecting in her eyes like small stars. "Because they have learned what I learned today?" The wind behaved differently. The pattern shifted. It became aware. Ethan frowned gently. "Aware of what?" She turned fully toward him, her voice soft but certain. "Aware of you." The room seemed to still for a moment, even the hum of the equipment softening as if listening. Ethan blinked. "Me?" "Yes," she said. "The storm responded to your choice. It reacted when you refused to move. It shaped itself around your action. That is not something my people can ignore." He swallowed, trying to process the idea. "I just did what I thought was right." "Exactly," Sierra replied. And the wind recognized that intention. It read it as strength. It read it as balance. Her tone warmed slightly. "And my people wish to understand a human who can influence a storm without meaning to." Ethan gave a small, uneasy smile. "I am not sure I can explain it to myself, let alone to a group of Aerith scouts." Sierra stepped closer, the faint luminescence from the window brushing across her armor. "Ethan Cole," she said gently, "you stood in the storm without fear, but you did not stand alone. The wind does not follow one person without reason." Ethan felt the quiet weight of her words settle through him. "So this summons," he said, "it is not just for you." "No," she replied. "It is for both of us." Another tremor rolled beneath their feet, softer now, almost like a welcoming gesture rather than a warning. The glow outside intensified for a breath before settling into a gentle, pulsing rhythm. Sierra looked at it one last time before she faced Ethan fully. "They want to meet the human who steadied the storm," she said, her voice steady. "But more than that, they want to know why you chose to steady me." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them held the quiet truth of everything unspoken since the wind first bent around them on the ridge. And just before the glow outside softened into darkness once more, Sierra added in a voice barely above a whisper, "And I wish to know that as well." The glow outside the outpost faded into a soft shimmer, leaving the air still and expectant, as if the sky itself was waiting for their next breath. Ethan stood beside Sierra, both of them watching the dimming light until it dissolved into the night. The pulse beneath the floor quieted, shifting from a summons to a gentle reminder that whatever approached was drawing near with intention rather than urgency. Sierra lowered her hand from the observation port, her expression calm, but lit with something new, something steady. "They will arrive soon," she said softly. "Not with noise, not with force. They will come the way the wind comes when it wishes to be understood." Ethan absorbed that with a slow breath. "And what do they expect from me?" She looked at him the way one might look at a horizon before choosing a direction. "Truth. Nothing more. Truth." A simple word, yet heavier than any storm. Ethan stepped closer to the console, feeling the hum of the equipment settle through his fingertips. The truth is, he said quietly, I did not know what would happen on that ridge. I just knew you were in danger. Sierra's eyes warmed slightly. That is the part they cannot predict. The part they wish to see with their own eyes. Outside, a soft shift of light rippled across the sand, not bright enough to illuminate, but enough to outline a graceful movement approaching from the darkness. Ethan felt his heartbeat settle into the same slow rhythm. Sierra stepped a little closer to him, not touching, but near enough that her presence grounded the moment. Ethan Cole, she said, her voice gentle and sure. You acted because your heart moved before your fear. That is rare among my people. That is rare among many. Ethan looked at her, the soft glow reflecting in her bronze-red skin, giving her an almost celestial presence. I did not see you as a soldier, he said. I just saw someone who needed help. Sierra held his gaze, and for the first time since the storm, there was no guarded caution in her expression, only quiet understanding. That, she said, is what changed everything. The shimmering figures approached the outpost at a slow, deliberate pace, their forms fluid in the faint light. They carried no weapons, no armor raised, only the calm presence of beings who moved with the wind rather than against it. Ethan felt no fear, only a quiet curiosity. Sierra stepped slightly ahead, then paused, glancing back at him with a softness that felt like its own kind of clarity. Whatever they decide, she said, I will speak for you. They will hear my truth. As well. Ethan nodded once. Thank you. The Aerith figures stopped just outside the perimeter, their silhouettes calm and composed. They waited, letting the stillness settle. Sierra turned fully toward Ethan. One more thing, she said, her voice almost a whisper. When you stood in the storm for me, I saw something I had never seen before. He met her eyes. What was that? A quiet breath escaped her, gentle as drifting dust. I saw a human make the wind hesitate. The night held them in a soft silence, and for a moment, the stars overhead seemed to draw closer, reflecting in her eyes with a warmth that did not belong to the sky alone. And as the Aerith approached to greet them, Ethan realized that whatever happened next was not the end of their story, but the beginning of something the wind itself had chosen to witness.